Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content, but since this is one of our special edition short episodes, we don't have time to record one of our comedic adult content warning masterpieces. I mean, we could have, in about the same amount of time it took to tell you we wouldn't, but we didn't. So there. Listener discretion is advised.
God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you. It's flaccid, sloppy writing. Any idiot can write voiceover narration to explain the thoughts of a character. Years from now, you'll be standing around a posh cocktail party congratulating yourself on how you spent an entire weekend locked in a room with an asshole from Hollywood for your art.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me. I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the New Way podcast where we break down pop culture so you don't have to. It's one of our shorter bite size. I don't know what just happened to Nick. He disappeared and for just a moment I saw Oh So Heaven-like on the screen.
Don't worry about it.
Which made me laugh.
We're all good.
It's one of our more bite-sized episodes. We feature spotlights on locations, actors, actresses, directors, writers, and more. We're also doing this, of course, during the Corona, so we are separate from one another. Ben is over there in Boynton Beach, just around the corner from me, but not allowed to see me. How's it going, Benny?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
And we've got Nick Santa Croce in hell.
In a room that's on fire saying, this is fine.
This is fine. This is fine.
Where does it say this is fine?
You don't know the meme.
I know. And yes, Nick is there in Los Angeles. So this special edition of The New Way is going to focus on the written works of a Mr. Damon Lindelof, who at times has been a polarizing figure in Hollywood, especially if you are a nerd. You have an opinion or a thought on him. If you do not know who Damon Lindelof is, he is one of the creators and writers of Lost. He's also gone on to work on movies like Cowboys and Aliens, Prometheus, one of Ben's favorites, Star Trek Into Darkness, Tomorrowland, World War Z, a bunch of other things. Lost is probably his highest profile. And then most recently, he's worked on the television series of Watchmen. But let's kind of get into...
Forgot the leftovers.
And I didn't forget the leftovers.
He's worked on Watchmen. Way to minimize him right out of the gate. He worked on Watchmen.
We're gonna talk about all of these things at length.
I'm already upset. I'm upset enough for myself. I'm upset for Lindsay Dommel, who couldn't be here today.
Let's
have some choice words for you.
Let's also begin this podcast with the part where Nick is going to continue to try to convince me that I hate Damon Lindelof, even though I've gone on record as defending him on quite a few times. But Nick will still find opportunity to tell me how much I shit on things for Damon Lindelof, which I really don't.
We know that harmony is not good radio, right?
And so, what was that?
You don't have to convince me of anything. I know he's a bad
The
writer.
fuck was that?
Did someone just break into your apartment?
Was that you? That you, Ben? I don't know what that was. What was that?
It was a weird sound on our side. It sounded
It was
like
Damon Lindelof breaking into your apartment because he heard somebody was talking.
it sounded like tinfoil over here. I don't know what it sounded like.
Oh my
on your
god!
Hopefully Nick doesn't get accosted during the recording of this podcast.
It's the smoke monster.
It is the smoke. It is definitely the smoke. So I'm excited actually to discuss him because he's one of the few people in Hollywood who's had great successes and great failures and actually turned them into learning lessons for himself and progressed and grown as a writer and showrunner and creator of things on it. And
I would also say that not only did he, constantly learning from his own mistakes, I think a lot of writers and showrunners in Hollywood benefited from watching him make his way, which is another reason I respect the fuck out of Damon Lindelof.
Well, and I listen, you've got to also figure that Lost came in right at that new advent of how TV was going to be consumed. It came out when DVRs are becoming a thing, HD TV is becoming a thing. People are looking for less serialized television. More serialized television, less procedural. So it was kind of a happy. He was one of the pioneers of what modern TV has become. And yes, you're going to fail at that when you're one of the first ones out of the gate, and watch other shows learn from those mistakes and get better and not fall into some of the same pitfalls. Lindelof went to NYU Film School. I know that's one of Ben's favorite film schools in the land, as he famously railed against a girl I was on a date with whose sister went to NYU Film School, and Ben was like, "Pfft." But I won't get into that anecdote just for now. But I do like this though. Went to NYU Film School, briefly played in a band called Petting Zoo before moving to Los Angeles to pursue a career in writing after graduating. So I thought that was kind of interesting, since we have two film school graduates here on the New Way who were in a band as well.
This doesn't sound like it has any similarities to Nick and Croce.
Yeah, it's not at all like Nick is going to play Damon Lindelof in the Damon Lindelof story. Should some
and I would
shave
my head. I would get some thicker frames. I would do whatever it took to give that man justice.
You gotta get in that. You're gonna get that T-neck New Jersey accent going. So his early career, he kind of wanders around on some TV shows. The first thing he wrote for wandered around. He wrote for Undressed, which I don't know if you guys ever watched any of Undressed.
I watched Undressed a little bit.
Undressed was kind of like the frat boy version of Freaks and Geeks, with just a lot hornier. It was an MTV show. It was trying to chronicle these
it's pretty bad
high school, college kids. It did have a very young Christina Hendricks in it, which I think a lot of us can appreciate. But yeah, it was not.
Was it a shared universe with Joe's Apartment?
No, it was not. It did feel like there were a lot of shows that came out around that time that I got confused, like Undressed, Undeclared. Not that they were all the same level of skill, but there were a lot of weird shows like that. Then he works on a show called Wasteland, which I've never seen, but I looked at the preview for it, and it's essentially Undressed, but it's more like the Edward Burns like version of like that early 2000s cross cutting between all these different relationships and young handsome people. And then he writes for Nash Bridges, which was the buddy cop show with Don Johnson and Cheech Marin. God help us, for many years, but it was being showrun by a man named Carlton Cuse, and that name is going to come up a little bit later. But he actually gave Lindelof his first staff writing position, which turns out to be really good for him as we get forward in this.
Bless him.
This thing.
Bless him. Doing the Lord's work.
Works on one other show before Lost comes along, and let's kind of talk about. Because we're going to get into Lost, and we've talked about it a lot in the show, but we haven't really talked about how Lost came to be, and it's kind of an interesting story. You've got Lloyd Braun, who's the head of ABC at the time, that has like one of these late night, like I love the idea of these TV executives that just like have these random 3 a.m. thoughts, and they text them out or email them out, and then someone has to actually try to make that shit, and they're always just weird. And his idea was like, hey, Castaway was really popular and Survivor's really popular. Let's make a TV show that's Castaway Survivor. And maybe a little bit, throw in some Gilligan's Island and Lord of the Flies. So everyone's like, okay, Lloyd, whatever you want. It was laughed. It was completely laughed at. He hires this guy named Jeffrey Lieber to write it. Jeffrey Lieber writes a pilot that is terrible and unwatchable. But the studio's now kind of gotten excited waiting for this property. Now they're kind of thinking some ideas. So they go out to J.J. Abrams, who's currently working on Alias at this time. And they say, hey, what do you think about this? And he's like, can I make some supernatural elements in it? And they're like, yeah, you can make some supernatural. I need supernatural elements and I need a writer. So he brings in Damon Lindelof to co-write the pilot. Jeffrey Lieber, by the way, still gets a created by credit. He had to go to court over it, but he never wrote anything for the series ever, but he gets nice residuals off of the Lost stuff.
Wasn't that nice?
Lindelof comes in, they write the pilot, they swear to the studio that there are two things. It will not be serialized, and it will not have supernatural elements in it, and it will not be a mystery box. Those are the guarantees they give to the network. Network says, okay. Network greenlights the most expensive pilot ever made for ABC Studios at $14 million.
Half the budget was just getting 2 parts of a plane to Hawaii.
Exactly. They shoot this thing. It is the ABC is so little confidence, and they're so freaked out that like they're finding out that it's going to be a mystery and it's going to be this other stuff, and they find out that there's going to be they don't know what's going on. They fire Lloyd Braun from the head of ABC because of Lost. This is before Lost becomes the turnaround for their network along with what Desperate Housewives and Grey's Anatomy, I think, were like the other two that turned that whole network around. Lost Nick for just a second here, but but it is kind of interesting. So this whole thing gets done. Abrams very quickly seems to lose interest in doing this, and he gets offered Mission Impossible 3. So Abrams is kind of like, well, I'm checking out. So they decide that they're going to let Lindelof be a showrunner, but he can't do it by himself. So he starts talking to Carlton Cuse. Cuse gets interested, and he brings Cuse in to be the co-showrunner, and the two of them run the entire series for the rest of the 6 seasons that it was on, which is like halfway through season 1. But it's a crazy just mix of people helping out other. It's a kind of a nice story to have these guys that, are being brought up and tapped, and then going
I
back.
I thought Abrams wasn't involved after the season 2.
He completely left after season 2, but midway through season 1, he went to go shoot Mission Impossible 3. He was still on. He penned the season 3 first episode, and that was the last episode he wrote for. That was the last major involvement he had. But he said, I'm going to be doing Mission Impossible. I can't run the show. So that's why they brought in Cuse, who had experience running shows like Ash Bridges. So that's why he brought him.
Let's rewind a little bit because as it's been said many times, I think on the podcast, but definitely within our group, I think that the pilot of Lost is the greatest pilot episode of television ever made. I think there's no question about that. I think it's the greatest pilot television episode ever.
I know you liked it, but I didn't know you would.
No, it's straight up my favorite.
Holy shit!
No, it's the best. I have never been more like sucked in immediately. Like I was so sucked in, and I was involved within 30 seconds. And it's so well shot, it's well executed, it's well acted, it's well cast. There's nothing wrong with that episode. It's literally perfect. If I had, I've got my top 20 movies of all time. If I had to take my television pilots, Lost is number 1, and it's not even close. It's like far away.
Wow.
It also is one of those pilots that was really fun to show people that hadn't seen it, and this is where, like I said, where it was great, where you could
Beth hooked on it because I was just like, just watch the pilot, and then she watched the entire show. She binged the fucking entire show.
Also, like in terms of like representation and ensemble cast, it's like a massive cast where everybody had a different background, and you had to for a successful pilot, for any successful pilot, you have to leave feeling like the characters, or you're invested in the characters. And that's why it's hard for the pilots of shows with really large casts just to widely succeed.
Yeah.
And I was actually just thinking about that rewatching the Party Down pilot, which doesn't have nearly as many people in it as Lost, but still manages to make a pretty large cast. Each character individually shines before you're out of it. And I feel like they not only do that with Lost, but definitely set up the world, the sense of mystery, and definitely set the table for the cliffhangers, which I guess became kind of a gimmick at a certain point. But when you have that from the very start, why not run with it? Why not make it your thing?
At a certain point in the 3rd episode.
I love it.
I like also that like their cliffhanger for that episode is Charlie going like, guys, where are we?
Where are we?
Which I'm like, well, you're never going to find out. That question's never really going to be answered necessarily. No. But
look, you can harp on moments of the show that don't make sense, or where they wrote themselves into a box, and all of those famous qualms. But the parts about Lost that I remember is it's truly one of the last event television shows that I remember marking my calendar and watching live. And if I missed it live, I didn't feel good about it. And I can't think of another show since that's had that effect on me.
Game of Thrones?
Yeah. I mean, 100%
I'm sorry.
Game of Thrones.
Game of what?
Yeah, I figured we were gonna the revisionist history. Where that
I
show
don't
doesn't
know what you're
exist.
talking about. Oh, Game of Thrones, the 6th season HBO series, fantasy series.
Yeah.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Anyway, they did all the fun stuff to certain people's satisfaction, to other people's great dissatisfaction. But the moments that I most like from Lost are the human moments, the character moments, the moments where they really got to chew scenery, create the world, and create the sense of loss. The scene that sticks out for me, the moment where I was like, okay, this is special, wasn't the pilot. It was a couple episodes in, a realistic number of episodes in, when Hurley's iPod battery goes out. And to me, that was a defining moment. And to me, I don't know if that was Lindelof specifically who wrote it in, but I feel it in my gut. It's that moment where he's finally finding a little solace, and he's finally kind of accepting where he is, stranded on this island with these nut jobs, and all he has had is this iPod, and he hasn't really even thought about it. And mid-song, ending credits, song goes out. Just, man, like I love TV that's visceral. You feel shit, and I remember when that happened. So many moments in Lost, even when you get into the deeper seasons, there are still moments where you're like, "Fuck," and that's what I want. That's what I want in a show, and very few shows are able to succeed in that.
It's like how it's reflective of Nick's values. It's not when somebody dies or when a terrible character arc happens. It's when somebody's iPod fucking dies.
Right in the middle of Dead Man's Party.
Well, I think what's also really interesting is Lost is very much, we talked about on a previous episode, Christopher Nolan and his tropes, and Lindelof definitely comes back to themes, and almost all of them are examined very much in Lost, as far as death and the afterlife, science versus faith. He's very, very interested in religion and faith and belief.
John Locke.
Yeah.
Shepard.
I mean, literally, you have a man of science versus a man of faith is the name of an episode in Lost.
I love it.
They lay it out very clearly with the backgammon, with the black and white pieces. Like there's very much these two sides to it. But he also establishes.
Wait. Are you saying there's a religious component to Lost?
I don't know. I mean, it does end in a church, but spoiler alert. But that is our final set piece is a giant church. But I also think,
Small church.
What you nail, Nick, is that character interaction and learning about those characters. And yeah, it got, by the time we're getting like Jack's tattoos, we got a little bit too much into that, but it was always about learning these backstories of who these characters were, where they're coming to. And that's also a great storytelling device to always be able to go in these flashbacks and see life before the island and see life on the island. And still to this day, the best fake out twist ending of a season of television I've ever seen. Ben, when you talk about, you've got your Mount Rushmore of pilots, the last episode of season 3 and the last 5 minutes of it and the reveal of what's been happening for that episode is one of the
Wait. Is that the constant?
No. The season 3 is we find out that they're off the island, and you've been watching it. You haven't been watching a flashback. You're watching a flash.
You think you
Right,
have
right.
Spoiler alert! If you haven't seen any of Lost yet, sorry, it's 10 years old. I'm sorry, you got to deal with it.
And see, but here's the thing. For me, that episode was the constant, where they introduced time travel with Desmond, a new character. The way that it all unraveled, whether they were writing it as they went or not. Maybe they didn't stick the landing that last season, but that ride is so good. And the thing that's, and this is why I know that I love Lost and why I know I love Damon Lindelof. For me, the death wish, the kiss of death for me is having a good movie and a bad ending. I would much rather have a consistently mediocre film, generally speaking, than something that exhilarates me and then lets me down at the end. And honestly, that is Lost. That is Lost for me. But it's such an exceptional case, and the ride and the journey was so special to me that it's a rare case of me being able to look past that last season. Not like Game of Thrones. I couldn't do that for Game of Thrones. I can do that for Lost. And to me, that's special showrunner, man.
Yeah, and I don't I have said I don't hate that last season. I think it's a great season as a standalone thing, as like it's almost like the Return to Gilligan's Island episodes. Like it's a really good self-contained
Oh
story.
God.
It's just it's not. It was frustrating to spend
Yes.
that many seasons with a show waiting for where you built this amazing mystery box. You have all of these threads, and just to see so many of them, just they couldn't get. They just there was nothing they were going to be able to do at a certain point. They just leaned in, and that was when they announced how many seasons they were going to do and what the episode order was. They did that after season 3, and that was when they wrote their arc and their stuff. And they're just like, and they once they did that, they knew they're not going to be able to answer this stuff. So we're just going to write an ending that works for us. And it was met with a lot of derision.
So what is the greater sin? Benioff and Weiss kind of losing source material and saying, you know what, let's spread our wings, let's do what we want to do, and break away from George R. R. Martin, and creating that abysmal season 8, or Lost, where they admittedly kind of wrote themselves into a box. We're looking at fan theories for ideas at some point. What is the greater sin? To me, I still get queasy thinking about Game of Thrones, and for some reason, a very disappointing last season for Lost. To me, I just never watched it again, and it's never bothered me the way Game of Thrones has, and I don't know truly why.
I will say this. I think that the one thing I can say for Benioff and Weiss, no matter what you think about the last season of Game of Thrones, is that they absolutely had an end game in mind. How they got there, whatever.
And that bothers you.
No, it really bothers me when you write a concept for a story and you don't have an ending in mind. And they didn't. Lost did not have an ending. Lost was a concept that they created and then exploited without having any sort of competent concept of how that ended. And I think that's irresponsible storytelling. That's my opinion.
And that,
I mean, I understand that, but I also kind of like, man, just in terms of the art, right? And I'm not trying to get too crazy about this or too artsy about it, but like, isn't truly fearless art about if you only have an amazing premise? What do? Do you just sit on it? You just never make it? You just
can't
don't make
have your
it?
cake and eat it too, Nick. Because I've heard you make the exact opposite.
No.
I've heard you make the exact opposite argument.
But listen to me. If you said to me that the greatest pilot you've ever seen is Lost. So what do? You just sit on it because you don't have a ending in mind, or do you say we'll figure it out? I have faith that we'll.
But they didn't figure it out. They didn't answer any of the
Right.
questions. They didn't answer anything.
Right, but Yogi Berra said that if you don't take a swing, you're gonna miss. Right? I paraphrase that.
Listen, there's somewhere in between. As I am with Lost always with you guys, I'm somewhere in between both of these things.
Like I said, I already said it was is my favorite pilot.
Right, but what I'm saying is, do you sit on that and never make it because you don't have an end game?
No, you
mind?
conceptualize it and you come up with the end game before you fucking make it.
But that's not how it works in the industry. They greenlit the pilot. They had to make it, man.
That is a problem with the industry.
So this is
not a problem with Damon Lindelof.
But no,
He wrote it.
It doesn't. So
It's a problem with the industry.
So hold on.
He's just trying to make a living.
All right, hey, everyone, calm down for a second. When you're
Damon Lindelof got to eat. Damon Lindelof got to eat.
So let me. So one of the things I wanted to get to on this as well is that Damon Lindelof and J.J. Abrams did write a Bible for Lost before, as they were writing the pilot. Right, which is something Ben Wilson and I did for our TV show as well. And we had our rule. Lost was happening while we were writing our show, so we had a steadfast. It was literally the Lost rule, which is we are not allowed to pen our pilot until we know where it's going. So much to the extent that we want Easter eggs, we want breadcrumbs in our pilot that don't pay off until the last episode. We want like
And
shit
that's
that
great.
like. And
Obviously, that's great.
but
that's a great way to do it.
but there's another frustrating component to this that's not addressed so much, is that they leaned so hard into that mystery box thing, including being coy in interviews and talking about this plan they had and wait till you see where we go, and everything's going to be explained by science. There's
So
no
duplicitous.
supernatural metals. There's all this shit that, I'll be honest, that got real frustrating for me. And I liked the show.
It was for ratings. It was to
But
drive ratings.
but I
up.
also think that
And it's
you've
a
got
problem with the industry.
You've got the constant, which is the best, I think, other than the pilot, the best episode of the show.
Thanks.
But Nick, for seasons 4, 5, and 6, name me other good episodes that come anywhere close to what we saw in season 1, where they were just building on what could happen and the mystery and the idea of Walt and all of these things and the box and the man in the room.
Are
and all this
the
shit.
only good writers and showrunners the ones that only make great series from beginning to end? I mean, where is our my biggest problem? And this is the thing. In a previous podcast, we highlighted the works of one Chris Nolan, and Ben doesn't hate Chris Nolan. He hates the fans that idolize him unduly. Would you say that's a fair summarization?
I don't think that's a fair summarization. I was saying I think he's
Somehow
a
I saw
talented
that coming.
filmmaker. However, I pointed out the fact that Chris Nolan's problem is he never sticks the landing in the third act, and oftentimes has either more than a third act or
So-
suffers from
so- so
overexposition.
all I'm
But for
saying-
plenty of stuff I think is wrong with Chris Nolan films.
All I'm saying is, like, to me, because Lost was so highly publicized, because it was a TV phenomenon, not since Twilight Zone, was this hard sci-fi being embraced by mainstream audiences.
Oh yeah, not since the X-Files about 5 years. before that.
All right, buddy, listen, it was a big deal.
Well,
And it was
so
it was under a microscope.
So before-
And I feel like the main thing I get upset about when people dissect Damon is because he had the misfortune of heading a influential, innovative TV show that didn't stick the landing, when there are plenty of people that we should be focusing our ire on, like Benioff and Weiss.
But this is not a competition.
Matt, we're good. We're good.
First of all,
we're good, Matt.
First of all, it's not a competition between who's most.
No.
Part of this, by the way, is I don't want to spend. We've spent another 20 minutes on the Lost finale again, which we've done so many times.
listen,
But just wait.
we can agree. We can agree he made mistakes. But Matt, one of your biggest things about him is that he learned from his mistakes.
Yeah, that's
moving
what
on
I'm
from
trying to
Lost.
get to that. So I want to make sure.
I think I did it more deftly.
I
though.
can still say that I don't like what they did with Lost, and still like where they went with other things, and that they improved on it. I think that's a big part. I literally said at the start of this, his redemption story is actually really interesting, and to watch his career path, because post Lost, it is also pretty fucking rocky for him.
Okay, well, so here's the other thing I just want to bring up really quickly.
Where's
So we're
the
talking
big
about no,
sin?
wait,
Where's
hold
the
on,
big sin here.
hold on.
Okay.
We're talking about Damon
making
Lindelof, right?
making a bad payoff to a great television series. Where's the sin?
It's the same thing that Benioff and Weiss did. Are you fucking kidding me, Nick? You keep
No,
arguing
it's
the
not.
same thing. They did a great. You tell me the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones isn't fucking great television?
So
You're
it's
peeking,
bullshit.
Matt. Be careful. You
Bullshit.
should move back from the microphone.
Bullshit,
a little bit.
Nick. You're being ridiculous.
So hold on one second though. We're talking about the writer Damon Lindelof. So let's talk about, as Matt said at the very beginning of the episode, his filmography. Films: Tomorrowland, World War Z, Star Trek Into Darkness, Prometheus, and Cowboys and Aliens. Now, what does that filmography instill in you from a quality standpoint? I'm just asking.
Well, I think it's
literally just interested.
Listen, Picasso fixed up an old 54 Chevy, but it turns out he's better at doing paintings. I made that up. Damon Lindelof is much better suited for television. I think that's what it says.
Agreed. Okay.
I think that's what that
agreed.
says.
But-
You don't have to jump on someone's fucking
But
job
I-
because they
what
had
I-
some stinkers.
But but you do.
All they had stinkers.
But you're doing that. What I don't understand is you do the same thing to Benioff and Weiss that you complain about people doing to Damon Lindelof. That I don't. That's where my
But
disconnect happens here. Is that it's the same thing.
I believe the difference is intent.
So you
And I
think they set out to fuck up the end? Their intent was, you know what?
No.
We have a great thing going for us. Let's fuck up the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones.
No,
let's do it, buddy. Let's fucking tank this shit.
No, I believe they thought they had such a loyal fan base that they could phone it in and no one would care. And I think that's the bigger sin. I think that you should be allowed to fail. I even agree
Like
that
season
if you
2
start
of
off,
Lost.
I think that, I also think that if you start writing something without a clear-cut ending in mind, but you have an opportunity and you're greenlit and you have to go, and that's what the industry dictates, you go for it, and you have faith that you'll figure it out. You might not,
and
you
if
might,
you
and you
don't,
might fail.
and the public is completely warranted to say, "Hey, you told us you had an ending. You promised us an ending, and you didn't. You lied to us. You fucking lied to us, and we didn't get it. So don't fucking. At some point, just be like, you know what? We don't have a fucking ending, which they did. Eventually, that's what they got to after they. You know what? We fucked up. We didn't have an ending. We got in over our heads. We tried to write it out. We tried to keep it going, and we didn't do it. And everyone's like, well, okay, well, you ruined this thing. So a lot of people, Nick, feel the same way about Lost that you feel about Game of Thrones. I don't feel like that about either of the properties. I still think the first fucking 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, and even a lot of season 6, are fucking great television. I mean, they're fucking great.
6 is great. It's 7 and 8 that are bad.
Yeah, but I like 7 too. But yeah,
I don't. But I do believe it's a different scenario there, and that's apples and oranges, and we can disagree on that. But I think that you're absolutely right. The one thing that I can't really defend is going public on like, oh yeah, we got it, when clearly they didn't. But that being said, I do think that was the biggest learning experience that Lindelof had. He became more transparent with his fans. He interacted more on Instagram after that. Well, he learned that, look, just be real. Be real about your shit and make your art, and people can like it or they can hate it, but don't mislead. Don't play the Hollywood game. Make your shit and let everyone else decide.
Well, let's talk about this Hollywood thing.
So, like I said, if you're going to talk about the Hollywood thing, let's talk about it, because that's what I was trying to bring up here.
Yeah, and
I want to get back to the positive side, because I have positive things to say about Damon Lindelof.
Yeah, but I want to go through this Hollywood thing, because I think also it's not just like he finished Lost and he's like, oh, I learned from everything I did wrong with Lost, and then like went out the gate. He went through 5 movies, right? We just talked about, but I want to go through those movies because I think it's interesting to see what he is learning and what is happening on each of those movies. And yes, Ben, it means we're going to have to talk Prometheus, which I know you will not be happy with.
Can we just skip Prometheus?
But I want to know, because we're going to discuss his works. We've talked about Lost in the show 30 fucking times. Let's talk about some of the other shit that he's worked on. That's what this is for, is to do this deep dive. So Cowboys and Aliens. So I kind of wrote notes on each of these things. This begins a pattern of what I saw with Lindelof, especially on the movies, but it also applies a little bit to Lost, which is the sum of the pieces not adding up to the whole. There are a lot of great elements that you see littered throughout all of these things, but ultimately, as an entire piece, it doesn't come together and it doesn't work, right? Also, when he's working with Orsi and Kurtzman, it doesn't seem to be his best work either. These are guys that have a wildly uneven track record with screenwriting.
Spider-Man 2.
Well, they do great things, like the first Star Trek is great. They did Mission Impossible 3, which is great. They wrote for a bunch of episodes of Alias, which are great, but then they also did The Island and Transformers and Amazing Spider-Man 2, and like they're all over the place, right? So he wrote with them.
Nick likes Amazing Spider-Man 2. So.
I do not. So Cowboys and Aliens wasn't a terrible movie. It was this big summer movie, and you were waiting for good Harrison Ford and something interesting. I think it was very miscast with Daniel Craig. It's one of the few times I felt he just drained charisma from, the man without a face walking into town, that whole thing. It just didn't work. And that's not just Lindelof's fault. That's Favreau. It's everybody involved.
The director of The Lion King, Ben?
Ben's favorite director.
Who you want to pile on? You want to pile on Damon? Or you want to get Jon Favreau again?
So following Cowboys and Aliens is Prometheus.
Let's look at Jon Favreau's filmography versus Damon Lindelof.
We're gonna do Favreau soon,
but what about Favreau's TV shows?
So they're not so good. Revolution was not a great TV show, but Mandalorian's phenomenal.
Mandalorian is phenomenal, but
he also had Dinner for Five. So
oh god, I fucking loved that show.
That's
so
easy
good.
to predict.
It's a TV show.
So Ben, tell me what it was like watching Prometheus for the first time.
God damn it!
I have to. It's just
what was the name of the ship in it though?
Oh shit! I don't even fucking know.
The SS Lindelfuck.
God damn you.
I was very excited about Prometheus going into it as one of the biggest alien mythos fans, and
you can't even name the ship, motherfucker.
I didn't even expect.
It was Prometheus that pushed that ship out of his brain. It broke him.
I think it was called Prometheus, right?
I think
That's
it was
the name of
the ship.
I think it was.
Yeah, it's the name of the ship. Yeah. Okay.
Fuck.
I thought you were talking about the alien ship.
Oh man.
Oh,
I thought you were talking about the alien.
I
for some
totally
reason in my head, I was
forgot.
thinking about
It's
the
the
alien
name of
ship.
the ship, of course. Of course.
But anyways, no, it was directed by the director of Alien, and it ruined that movie for me. It like almost ruined that movie for me. I have to kind of extricate it from my mind. That
It's Damon Lindelof's fault.
I mean,
it was a very poorly written movie.
It was
It was.
and there was a lot. There was the direction is not.
But
great.
how many writers were on that movie?
I think it's just him and one other. Just him
Yeah.
and another, and then they have like credited for the guys that created the Alien.
First off,
I blame the other guy.
So first off, it's just ridiculously dumb. I mean, the premise is just ridiculously dumb. It's
The premise is the only thing I like about it.
no, it's dumb. No, I mean, like just
Explaining, like, I mean, that's the only part that works for me. The opening shot, and even though the ending with the pseudo xenomorph was dumb, I love that's where you. Here's the thing. That's where you go. With
that's not.
That's
oh,
where you
God.
go with the prequel, but it wasn't executed at all. And I think that yes, the
Space
writing was a big
jockey
part of
was
it.
meant to be a space jockey. It wasn't supposed to be a god complex who created man. I'm sorry. It's just it's. I think the entire
Well,
thing is
some-
fucking stupid. I knew that's where you're going with that. But anyways, no, I did not like Prometheus. I think it's one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen. It's almost as dumb as Alien Covenant, which was the sequel that Ridley Scott directed, which is just as bad.
What do you think of the Alien video game?
Alien Isolation is the best thing that's come out since Alien.
We're not
3.
talking about Sega CD. We're not talking about the Alien video games. All right.
Oh,
so-
this is next gen. This is next gen. Don't worry, man.
Well, so Prometheus. I remember distinctly. Prometheus was a big dent for Lindelof. Like that was where a bunch of because now you've got sci-fi fans double burned on especially burning aliens.
Half of the sci-fi fans loved it. They thought it was the most amazing.
I don't know, man. I thought everybody
people loved
hate-
it.
Really?
And then the other fans were just like, "You fucking serious?"
Well,
Like,
that's because people like
Really?
you like Hollywood sci-fi. This was hard sci-fi.
I
This
didn't
was
remember
legit.
anyone. I'm pretty forgiving, and my brother and I
Okay,
are pretty
party
forgiving.
down.
My brother and I are pretty forgiving on those movies, but like brother was like Prometheus was like what a mess. Like it's a mess of a movie.
It's
But
a mess.
so then Lindelof's next one, which he writes with Orsi Kursman, is Star Trek Into Darkness, and not great, but not terrible. It's not
Not
Prometheus.
Not terrible.
Damon Lindelof, new reviews. Not terrible.
Not terrible.
Not
dare
as
you.
terrible. But yeah, Sergeant Runners also falls into that trap that they try to create a mystery, the same trap that they did in Spectre, of taking a known character and then making some mystery around it, and so just being like, no, fucking just make it Khan. Like
They
it was
Shyamalan
stupid.
themselves.
Yeah.
They Shyamalan themselves.
And it sucks because the first Trek is so good, and the third Trek is really good too. That second one is just it's missing all of the charm of the other one. Now,
To me, and honestly, this has nothing to do with Damon Lindelof. If I'm watching a Star Trek film and Spock doesn't talk to a whale, I don't give a shit.
this is true. Swim with it. Get in that water with it.
Mhm.
So the next one is maybe a little polarizing amongst us because I like World War Z.
Ooh.
And I especially like the ending. I like the
I like
fact
it.
that they go small and they bring it inside and internalize it, and it becomes kind of a real thing. I really like that movie.
Wasn't the original ending.
Correct. And that I was gonna say there's a mired history of how that movie was made and how it almost didn't actually happen even after being in production.
And I believe that Max, or what's the name of the author?
Max Landis.
Max. What
Is it Max? It's Max Landis, isn't it?
was it?
I think so. It's Landis's kid that wrote World War Z.
No. It's Max Brooks.
Oh, Brooks. It's Brooks's kid.
Brooks. That's right. So I believe
Landis's
that, I
son
think that
did
he was
Thank
kind
You
of
for
instrumental in also finalizing some of the stuff that happened in the final versions of that film too. So I'm not sure what Lindelof contributed to or what not. I don't hate that movie either, but that was a movie that was in production hell for a long time.
He actually was the one that was brought in, oddly enough, to rescue it. So he actually wrote that new ending and stuff, which is kind of amazing.
Well done.
You also have to look.
And by the way, Matt, I think that you would really enjoy this if you go on NPR and find his recent interview. They interviewed him about the current pandemic.
Oh,
because
nice.
he actually made many contacts within the CDC because of the research he had to do for World War Z. I highly recommend it to you and our listeners at home.
I will check that out. Yeah, and I think World War Z was, it's interesting that there was still confidence in him from at least the studio level, largely because Cowboys and Aliens, Prometheus, and Star Trek Into Darkness, while not critically well received, still made money. They made bank at the box office, and if you're still making money for a studio, they will continue to hire you no matter what, unless you got to do a lot to get out. So Tomorrowland is
Adam Sandler movies on Netflix.
I would say,
am I getting better? Am I getting better?
I don't. It was not terrible.
Not sure.
Okay. Right. I'll take it.
I don't know.
I'll take it.
So then we get to Tomorrowland. Tomorrowland that one hurt me. That one honestly hurt probably
Such a
more
bad
than Prometheus. And it's not that it's terrible, but it's Brad Bird and the cast is great, and you've got Lindelof, and the premise is not the premise, and the message of the movie are everything. All the pieces are there, and that's the biggest thing that I feel Lindelof had to have been learning during this time is he's great at ideas and thoughts and moments, but putting them together and having them build on one another toward a goal, that was what he had not.
You haven't seen the movie. It's pretty it's an abomination.
I don't need to see the Tomorrowland movie to know that it's an abomination. But that's speaking again more to my point. Damon Lindelof got to eat. That's the industry. Look, yeah, you know what? They were able to translate Pirates of the Caribbean. Okay, give them that. I'll give him that. But like Eddie Murphy was in the Haunted Mansion, and when you get offered a Disney property after Pirates, what you just say no?
Matt, did we just do a written by Charlie Kaufman podcast?
Yeah, no. Listen, look. First of all, I literally broke his career down into pre-Lost, post-Lost film TV, and the comeback. And I want to get to the comeback. It's important. But I don't think it's fair to just say because he learned his lesson, he got good at things, that we just forget all of and you keep
I'm not saying that either.
But Nick, you keep saying people got to eat. So Benioff and Weiss got to eat. Were they supposed to turn down what they're doing with the thing? You can't justify someone's bad works and then bitch about someone else's bad works. So you got to have both.
Listen,
he picks and chooses who he likes.
Yeah, it's not true.
It's completely true, Nick. You're doing the same thing.
Man. Benioff and Weiss were flush with jobs. In fact, that's a rumor why they rushed through season 8. They were attached to Star Wars. They had a three-thing deal with Netflix. They were eating fine. All I'm saying is, I think a lot of criticism for Damon Lindelof were in his, and I'll call them formative years. These are more industry problems than they are what's in your heart. And to me, and debate me, coward, but to me, it's intent. To me, it's you gave up. I don't think he ever gave up on anything. I think he just failed at it. And
Nick, I think the only reason why you really like Lindelof is because Lindelof's been transparent about his failures, and he's actually been able to talk. He's been able to talk with the fans. That's the only reason why you like him more than Benioff and Weiss.
No, it's one of many reasons, but you're absolutely right.
But I know you're also you're very critical of other TV shows and writers on that and other things even and it's not a good show, but looking at something like The Walking Dead, I think all of things, everything you talked about could be chalked up to that's the Hollywood system or that's whatever.
That's what they want.
I really don't feel that you have so many. There are all these people that are actively not trying to make good stuff. They're just not good at it.
You inadvertently make my point by choosing Walking Dead as an example because, like I said before, that's to me such a clear-cut. Game of Thronesian, this already has such a huge fan base We can mail this in and it won't matter because they're eating it up.
Well,
That's how I feel.
I don't feel you have an entire.
It's all about intent.
I don't think you have these writing staffs that just show. They're like, hey, well, this sucks and we don't like it. We're not trying hard and we're just going to collect our paycheck. If that's all of everything that's happening, and that I don't believe that happens for all of these shows. You can't just say because it's not good that people aren't trying to make good shit.
Well,
I think there's some guy.
I've been in a writer's room. I've worked for a writer's room. So
all right, but there are people that are getting hired for this writer's room. That's their job. That's what they get, right? So Nick, right now you get hired to work on The Walking Dead. Do you turn the job down? I mean, that's a legit question.
Of course not. And again, that speaks to my point. Would you turn down a good work? You have to have faith in yourself that you can elevate it, no matter what the odds are. Whether you have an ending in mind, or whether you sign on to a shitty Kirkland.
But you're working in a room of other writers, and you can't elevate it. Do you stay on the show? Or do you quit? Like it can't. It doesn't work.
No,
it's not 100%. Everyone hates it, or 100% everyone is not trying.
Matt, it's weird talking because you keep making my point.
I'm not making your point at all.
No, you are. You are making my point because you don't give up. That's my whole point. To me, I felt like Benioff and Weiss gave up. I don't feel like Damon Lindelof has ever given up.
I hate the fact that any of us are talking like we know these fucking writers.
No, we don't.
We know that we're in these rooms.
That's what it is. But guess what? But that's what it is. We're on a podcast talking about our opinions, and that's what it boils down to for me. For me, yes, you follow Damon.
But you're presupposing the way that people think or the way that people are acting, which
to me,
I don't think it's non-objective.
Listen, and that's a good point. Also, when you think about it like this, South Park broaches a lot of racist shit, and they approach it head on. But do you ever doubt their intent? When you hear the leaked audio of Michael Richards spurting the N-word at people at open mic, you kind of feel, oh, maybe that's just in his heart. With South Park, they don't shy away from that shit, but I don't ever question their intent. And that's a judgment call, because some people might say, no, they're being racist. And yes, it is about a judgment call. And to me, the biggest difference between Benioff and Weiss and Damon Lindelof, while there are very similar themes there, but also there's toxic fandom in the mix too, which you can't ignore. But to me, personally, as a matter of opinion, it is about intent, and it's about whether you give up on something or you give it your best shot and you fail. And I think that throughout his career, my gut instinct is that he's always given it he's got, but he's had a lot of failures. But then he became more transparent. He learned from his mistakes. We haven't heard shit from Benioff and Weiss after this. And who knows what's going to happen. I follow their career with great interest. But to me, it's about intent.
All right. So let's get to the comeback of Lindelof.
I'm with you.
And I don't, like I said, I don't know. We don't know what's going on in any of these. I think it's strange. I think it's strange though to look at them so diametrically different. Versus I look at them the same.
I hope that if Benioff and Weiss actually put out something good, you're not going to look at it with those jaded eyes and you're just going to be like, nope, it's shit because they made it.
No, of course not. Of course not. I mean that's like saying, I held,
and that would be like me talking about how Damon Lindelof is only going to make shit because he wrote Prometheus.
I held Al Franken.
I'm about to talk about my favorite show of the last decade.
Yeah, let's get into the goods because we're going to be way over on this. So let's kind of get into
Al Franken accountable. I'll hold anybody accountable, and I would love to see something from those guys. Honestly, I would, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
Okay, we didn't hold our breath for Damon Lindelof, to be honest. I mean,
and he proves you wrong.
He didn't prove me wrong. So Leftovers is a fucking phenomenal TV show, and that's the really the.
Would you say masterpiece?
I think
it's his masterpiece.
Yeah, and it is very. You can tell it's very personal. It also didn't. Now, here's the thing that is a little bit scary. Leftovers did not know where it was going. Right. So when you to your point, Nick, when you talk about these big swings and stuff, The Leftovers is based on a book, and the first season follows that book
by election author Tom Perrotta.
Go ahead, Nick. Go ahead, Ben.
The seasons knew where they were going. They had mapped out the seasons in advance. And each season has its own very particular storyline and very particular arc. In a storyline that doesn't necessarily have to be linear and is not a procedural and is not serial and does not have some sort of weird, like, what's in the box moment at the end of every fucking episode. The Leftovers succeeds because it plays to every single one of Lindelof's strengths, and he doesn't have to adhere to that studio methodology of doing any of that.
Yeah,
And Barry Jenkins in season 2.
Well, no, it's not. I mean, first of all, the studio. Just remember what we said about Lost. The studio did not. They adamantly told them, do not make a mystery box show. That was that was their thing. They told them, don't do that, and they were like, well, fuck you. We want to make a mystery box. What is great about Leftovers is he obviously. This is where I can appreciate the effort from a writer, because I'm in a similar way that I know what shit I'm good at and what shit I'm not good at. He very clearly, I think, in laying out that series and whoever he worked with in building that series, it's not entirely. He has another showrunner on it. I'm not sure who that is, but what they did with that show is they literally said, what are we bad at? And how do we skirt around all of those things? So one of those things is like, we're not real great with ending and reveals, but we're great with character work. How do we end this whole thing? And I think that last scene of the last episode of the Leftovers is a perfect example of all of the things you love for Lost. Just a little bit of an answer, but not really. It's kind of up in the air, but it's satisfying. There is a closure that happens there, and they realize you don't have to give the answers to have closure if you know ahead of a time that you're not going to answer the big question.
Yeah, if you know you're not going to get them, if you set the precedent, you're not going to get those answers, because that's what the whole show of The Leftovers is about. It's about not understanding what's happening,
and it's great. And that show ends with like a 30-minute conversation at a table. Like that is the end of that show, and it is so quiet and so personal.
Feel me, man.
And it's phenomenal. Like it really is, and it tackles all of the things that he wants to talk about with religion, with death, about faith, and about belief and your beliefs. And he does it with such respect for each of those characters. Most of the characters are not vilified too much all the time. You have some of the sect and some of the stuff with certain ones, but like, Brother Matt.
I feel like they could have been more thorough with their.
There we go. Well, it also is worth it every season to watch the Crazy Thoreau episode with Peter Coyote, which is always just fucking amazing shit. But yeah, I definitely watch The Leftovers. And then let's really quickly, because I know, Ben, you didn't love Watchmen quite as much, I think, as some of the rest of us. And maybe the ending. What I liked about Watchmen's a great example of learning from other things he learned. So Watchmen very much was the puzzle box and leading toward a very definitive answer and reveal. And I think people honestly didn't respond. That's where Lindelof
in a one season format,
yes.
Of course.
And I think that's also interesting for Lindelof to kind of, you look at how people reacted to the ending of that show, and there was not universally where he went exactly with it and how it all came together wasn't necessarily universally loved or disliked. I think everyone's got a preconceived notion about how stuff should end. And that's always the trick. You're not going to when you make a definitive choice on an ending and on an end game, you're never going to fulfill everyone's things. But what I do love that Watchmen did that I can appreciate, I just love and I almost can't use the word, but the literal Easter eggs throughout the entire season that are staring you in the face about the reveal you get to, that once I finished the series and then went back and rewatched and looked at the notes, and I was like, you gotta fucking be kidding me. Like, it's like Sixth Sense apparent. That was
Damon saying, I know the ending of this one, motherfucker.
Yeah, and that's great to do that for 9 episodes or 10 episodes of television. And I think that's another thing he learned. He's not doing another season. He's like, no, I don't want to carry this over multiple
they asked
season
him to
arcs
because it was so popular, and he was like, nope, that was it. And that's smart.
And think about the clout. That's how. That's not even how you know you've made it. How you know you've made it is you create something that is pretty well received, that's based on a property that is beloved. I mean, widely recognized. Again, the parallels to Game of Thrones don't end. Maybe the most revered graphic novel of all time. And now that's not even the legacy. Following Watchmen, the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre was added to the Oklahoma curriculum because of Watchmen. Because of that coming to light in a comic book adaptation, I mean, that's when I felt like, he has found comfort and he's doing whatever he wants to do. He's fearless again. He's not afraid of letting people down. He feels like he's learned from his mistakes. And you talk about the Damon Lindelof arc. I feel like Watchmen was a big part of it.
Well, and so the last thing I want to talk about, I don't know if any of you guys watched it, because I had forgotten that he wrote it. He wrote it with Carlton Cuse's kid. But I watched The Hunt today. Have either of you guys watched The Hunt yet?
No, I'm looking forward to watching it. I mean, it seems fun.
But you hate Damon Lindelof.
So The Hunt.
I don't.
So we recently talked about a movie on the podcast called The Last Supper, to which The Hunt owes a lot. Obviously, there's also The Most Dangerous Game, which is a big influence on it, but tonally, this movie is this year's version of The Last Supper. It really is, except that I think I'll give Lindelof just a little bit more credit than Last Supper of making much more of an argument for centrist values instead of extremes, because it's really the movie.
You just like sitting on the fence.
Well, then if you don't think that there are extremes on the left that are awful and extremes on the right that are awful, which, like, how I feel, that's what this entire movie is about. I'll tell you, if you are a conservative and you're listening to this, which is completely fine, we welcome anybody listening to it. Don't turn the movie off at the beginning, because you're going to think that it is very one-sided, and I assure you the reveals and the twists and the turns it takes do not paint either side of an extreme viewpoint on politics in any favorable light.
You never know. Hellboy might win in the end.
It's a hell of a fun ride. It is very dark satire, very dark comedy, a little uncomfortable, but I will also give them credit for, and this isn't necessarily a spoiler, but there are a bunch of big names that show up in this movie for very little time. that are kind of amazing, where something, I don't remember hearing about, like, okay, I see what's happening here. It is super, super fun. You can rent it right now for $20 on Amazon Prime. It was supposed to be in theaters right now. I don't know, by the way, how you ever release this movie in theaters. Once you watch it, I think is a much better straight to video, because it is.
Wow.
It is, when I say dark satire, it is fucking Jonathan Swift, Modest Proposal.
I love it.
Dark. Like, get ready, buckle up. So
Cool.
I think it's a great. It's his first movie effort that I've seen from him that I really, really dug, that felt also a little bit different from his other shit. It's more snappy dialogue and situations. So it's kind of interesting to see that evolution. But
Nice.
that will wrap up our talk on
And
David
I will
Benioff
say this,
and Weiss.
The last thing I want to say, it was kind of used as like a semi dig, but Damon Lindelof is a great follow on Instagram, and I do like him as a person. And I think there is something to be said about being the scourge of every fanboy and receiving the ire of everyone who loved Lost and hated the ending for years and years and years, harassed online, to be where you are now with your fans and to have the relationship you have now with your fans that Damon Lindelof has, I think shows a kid who got a great opportunity with Lost, maybe didn't sit the landing, learned a lot of lessons, and made his way. It's what I love about Damon Lindelof when it comes down to it, is maybe he didn't have a roadmap and it was a bumpy ride, but I'm excited to see where we go from here.
We shall see. That'll wrap it up for us today. We want to thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Cheers.
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 There we go.
I think I won that one pretty clearly. I think that you guys